There is a particular kind of silence that settles over a woman when she realizes the people who are supposed to protect her have chosen, quietly and without apology, not to. Dami had been living inside that silence for 3 weeks. Ever since the night she came home from the hospital, stitched and pale and holding Destiny against her chest. And the first thing Mama Bayo said when she saw her was not, "Thank God you are alive." It was, "Maybe next time it will be a boy." Destiny's delivery had not gone the way the others had. There had been bleeding, the kind that makes nurses move faster and speak less. There had been a surgery, an emergency one, performed at 2 in the morning while Bayo stood in the corridor outside, and Dami lay on a table counting the ceiling tiles because the anesthesia had not fully taken, and she needed something to hold her mind to. She had been in that hospital for 11 days. 11 days during which her 3 daughters at home were managed by a neighbor, during which Bayo visited every evening and left before 9, during which Mama Bayo came twice, both times bringing food for Bayo, not for Dami. When the doctor finally sat across from them both in his office, his voice was careful in the way that doctors are careful when they are saying something serious to people they are not sure will hear it. "Mrs. Dami," he said, "your uterus sustained significant trauma during this delivery. Another pregnancy, if it is even possible, would carry risks I cannot recommend you take. I am advising you, formally and clearly, not to attempt another pregnancy." Bayo had nodded in the doctor's office. He had said, "Yes, doctor, and we understand," and he had held Dami's hand on the drive home. That had been 6 weeks ago. The night she heard it, Dami was on the back veranda with Destiny, sitting in the dark after the compound had gone quiet. 2 voices drifted from the bench near the kitchen window, a neighbor and Mama Bayo. "4 girls," the neighbor said, with the tone of a woman performing sympathy. Mama Bayo made a sound in her throat, the sound of a woman who had more to say than she was releasing. "A man's name does not carry itself," she said quietly. "My son has been patient. I have also been patient. But there are women who will give this family what it needs. I have already started making inquiries. But the delivery, I heard it was serious. Women have babies," Mama Bayo said, her voice flattening. "That is what they do. If she will not do it, someone else will." Dami did not move. She sat with Destiny warm against her chest and her hand flat and still against her daughter's back, and she listened to a woman discuss replacing her the way you discuss replacing a household appliance that has stopped performing its function. She did not cry. She pressed her lips together and looked down at Destiny's face. That was the night something in her decided to stop waiting. 12 years in this compound. 12 years of building a life inside someone else's family structure, of learning which silences to keep and which arguments were not worth the cost. She had come here at 26 from her father Dotun's house in Ibadan, carrying the particular brightness of a woman who still believed that love and effort were enough. Bayo had been easy to love then. Juliet came first. She was 12 now, sharp and watchful in the way eldest daughters become when they grow up observing things adults assume they do not understand. Then Tolu, then Success, then Destiny, who had almost cost Dami her life and who slept now in her arms with no knowledge of any of it. 4 daughters. 4 pregnancies that had moved through her body like slow seasons. And now a doctor's warning is sitting on the table, formal and clear, and a family that was already deciding to ignore it. She waited until morning to speak to Bayo. The bedroom door closed. The compound is not yet fully awake. She told him, without drama, what she had heard from the veranda. He listened with his hands loose between his knees, his eyes on the floor. "She doesn't mean it the way it sounded," he said. "Bayo." Her voice was steady. "The doctor told us, in that office. You are sitting right beside me." "I know what the doctor said." "Then you know what an under-pregnancy means for me." He was quiet for a moment that stretched longer than it should have. "I will talk to her," he said finally. "I will handle it." Dami looked at him. This man she had followed to Lagos at 26. This man who had held her hand in the car on the way home from the hospital. She looked at him the way you look at someone when you are deciding whether to keep believing them. You said that after success, she said quietly. You said it again in the hospital, and she is still talking. He had no answer for that. The Sunday it became a formal demand was 3 weeks later. Mama Bayo had arranged a family lunch, 2 aunts, an uncle and a cousin from Abeokuta. Dami had cooked. Juliet had helped her set the table. The children were sent outside before the adults settled. 20 minutes of ordinary conversation. Then Mama Bayo folded her hands and turned to Dami with the expression of a woman who had been rehearsing. We need to talk about this family, she said. The aunts kept eating. The uncle reached for his drink. Nobody looked up. 4 children, Mama Bayo continued, and not 1 son. We have prayed, we have waited, but in this family, we do not leave a man's name to die with daughters. She paused. There are ways to handle this. You can try again. The doctor said, Dami began. Doctors say many things. Mama Bayo's voice did not rise. It simply closed like a door. Women in this family have delivered in worse conditions. What the doctor said is not the final word in this house. She glanced toward Bayo at the head of the table. If she is not willing, then arrangements will be made. There are women who are. The room held its breath. A full room of adults. And not one voice, not one word, not one person who looked at Dami and said, This is wrong. Dami counted 10 seconds. She did not know why she was counting. Then she folded her napkin, placed it beside her plate and stood. Excuse me, she said, in the voice of a woman who understood that breaking in this room would be used against her. She walked to the bedroom. She closed the door. And standing alone in the center of that room, listening to the faint sound of cutlery resuming from the dining room, Dami finally understood the full shape of what she was facing. It was not just her mother-in-law. It was not just her husband's silence. It was the doctor's warning sitting in that house like a piece of paper nobody wanted to read, and the family willing to risk her life for a son, without shame, without hesitation, without even the decency to lower their voices. 7 months is a long time to hold a position inside a house that has turned against you. 7 months of Sunday lunches where the conversation circled the same subject like a slow drain. 7 months of Mama Bayo's pointed silences at the dinner table, of aunts who visited and spoke to Bayo as though Dami were furniture that had been rearranged into an inconvenient corner. 7 months of her husband sleeping beside her and saying nothing. Not defending her, not joining them. Just existing in the neutral space between his mother and his wife and calling that neutrality peace. It was not peace. It was abandonment with a pleasant face. The pressure did not always come loudly. Some days it came through small things. The way Mama Bayo would sigh when Destiny cried, as though the child's existence were an ongoing inconvenience. The way relatives greeted Bayo warmly at gatherings and added Dami's name like a footnote. The way nobody ever said directly, we do not value your daughters. They simply behaved as though they didn't, consistently and without apology, and waited for Dami to draw her own conclusions. She drew them. She simply refused for 7 months to say them out loud. The morning she agreed it was raining. She had not slept well. Destiny was teething and had been difficult past midnight. Juliet had climbed into the bed beside her at some point without asking, the way children do when they sense a parent needs company. Dami had lain there with her eldest daughter's weight against her side, listening to the rain, making the calculations she had been making and refusing and making again for 7 months. She was not agreeing because she believed she was incomplete. She knew, in the clear and sentimental part of herself, that her 4 daughters were not a failure. They were people. Whole, irreplaceable people who called her mommy and needed her to still be standing. The problem in this house was not her body. It was the thinking of the people around her. She agreed because she was tired, because the atmosphere in the compound had become something her daughters were breathing every day, and she could see it changing them, because Bayo had come to her the night before with the closest thing to a plea she had ever heard from him. Dami, please, just try, for the family. After this, I promise things will be different. And she had looked at his face and chosen, one last time, to believe him. She agreed for peace, not for them. For the 4 girls sleeping down the corridor, who deserved a home that did not feel like a held breath. She told Bayo in the morning, quietly, while the rain came down. He held her hand. He said, "Thank you." Mama Bayo, when she heard, did not say thank you. She said, "Finally, God will bless this house with a son this time." Dami smiled the way women smile when smiling is required of them. The pregnancy announced itself with difficulty from the first trimester. The nausea was worse than all the others combined. Not limited to mornings, but arriving at any hour, unpredictable and exhausting. Her blood pressure began rising by the 14th week. The doctor flagged it at every visit with increasing seriousness, his language growing more direct each time. By 16 weeks, she was on bed rest, moving through the compound slowly, carefully, like a woman navigating glass. Inside the compound, none of this registered as the emergency it was. What registered was the pregnancy itself. The possibility of a son, the hope of it, the version of the future Mama Bayo had already decided upon. She began referring to the baby as him from the first week of the news, before any scan, before any indication, purely from the force of wanting. Relatives called to congratulate Bayo. An aunt began buying blue fabric. A cousin sent a message saying, "This one na boy, I can feel am." When Dami mentioned at the dinner table that her blood pressure was being monitored closely, Mama Bayo said, "Drink bitter leaf water. These doctors like to frighten people." Nobody asked how she was sleeping. Nobody asked if she needed help with the 4 children already in the house. Nobody asked what she needed. They asked always whether she had done another scan, whether the doctor had said anything about the gender, whether she felt it was a boy this time. She answered. She smiled. She went back to bed and lay in the dark and listened to her own heartbeat and tried to count it steady. Juliet watched all of it. 12 years old is old enough to understand what is happening in a house even when adults believe they are being subtle. Juliet had her mother's eyes, observant, slow to reveal what they were thinking. Without being asked, she began waking earlier to help with Destiny, keeping Tolu and Success occupied in the evenings, so the compound noise would not disturb Dami's rest. She made tea the way she had watched her mother make it and brought it to the bedroom door and left it there without knocking. Because she had learned that sometimes her mother needed things without needing to receive them from someone's hands. She stopped talking at the dinner table. Tolu, who was 9 and had always been the loudest of the 4, began flinching slightly whenever Mama Bayo entered the room. A small thing, a tensing of the shoulders, a going quiet. The physical adjustment children make when they have learned that certain presences require them to become smaller. Success, who was 5, stopped singing. She had always sung to herself while playing. Tuneless, continuous, the sound of a child who felt safe enough to make noise. Somewhere in the 2nd trimester, the singing stopped. Nobody in the compound noticed. Dami noticed. She lay on bed rest, listening to the silence where Success's voice used to be. And the noticing was its own kind of grief that she had nobody to speak out loud to. There was no one to call. No sister nearby. No friend inside the compound who was hers rather than the family's. No woman in that household who looked at her situation and said, even privately, this is wrong. She was surrounded by people and she was completely alone. And the loneliness had a specific texture. The texture of a woman who has given everything to a household and discovered in the giving that she had handed over the very things that might have protected her. She carried it, the way she carried everything. Without theater, without collapse, day after day, trimester after trimester. The doctor's worry growing at each appointment, while the compound's conversation remained fixed on a son that had not yet arrived. Some nights she would sit at the small desk in the corner of the bedroom after Bayo had fallen asleep, and she would begin composing letters in her head to her father in Ibadan. Dotun, the retired school teacher who had always been able to look at her and know when something was wrong without her having to say a word. She composed the letters fully, in her mind, paragraph by careful paragraph. She never wrote them down. She had made this choice. She would carry it herself. The baby came at 38 weeks, a Thursday morning. The delivery was tense in the way the doctor had warned it might be. Her blood pressure spiking during labor. A room that went briefly and sharply quiet in a way that told Dami, even through the pain, that things were closer to the edge than the nurses were saying. But it resolved. Her body, which had been asked more than it should have been asked, held. When the nurse placed the baby in her arms, Dami looked at her daughter's face. Small, creased, furious at the world in the way all newborns are, and felt the same thing she had felt 4 times before, complete and uncomplicated love. The nurse filled in the form. Another girl, the 5th daughter. The news reached the compound before Dami did. Bayo had been in the waiting area. When the nurse came out with the information, Dami heard later, that he had sat very still for a long moment, and then stepped outside to make a phone call. He came into the room afterward. He stood at the foot of the bed and looked at his wife and his new daughter with an expression Dami recognized immediately because she had spent 12 years learning his face. It was not the expression of a man arriving at a decision. It was the expression of a man who had already received one. He did not hold the baby. He said he would be back. He went outside again. This time, he did not come back until the following day. And when he came with his mother. Dami returned to the compound 2 days after the birth. She came through the gate carefully, still sore, holding her 5th daughter, while Juliet carried Destiny behind her. The compound was quiet in an arranged way. The particular quiet of a place where people have been told to be elsewhere. The parlor door was closed. Voices inside. Juliet was already standing in the courtyard. She had positioned herself facing the gate as though she had been standing there for some time. When she saw Dami, she walked over immediately and took Destiny from the neighbor who had accompanied them from the hospital. She did it without being asked, without a word, with the quiet efficiency of a 12-year-old who had spent the past 2 days preparing for something she did not fully have words for. Dami looked at her daughter's face. Juliet looked back, those eyes so much like her own, and then glanced toward the closed parlor door and then back at her mother. I know, that look said. I have been watching. Dami touched her daughter's face briefly. Then she walked inside. Bayo came to the bedroom that evening alone. He sat down on the edge of the bed. He did not look at her directly. He spoke in a careful way of a man reciting something he has rehearsed or been coached. He said the family had reached a decision. He said they could no longer wait. He said there was a woman his mother had already been in discussion with. A woman who could give the family what 5 pregnancies had not. He said he was sorry. He said it was not about Dami as a person. He said these things as though their arrangement into sentences made them reasonable. He did not want to look at the baby in the crib. Dami sat on the bed and listened to every word. She did not interrupt. She did not raise her voice. When he finished, the room was very quiet. And you agree with them, she said. It was not a question. He said nothing, which was its own answer. She looked at him for a long time. This man she had followed to Lagos at 26. This man whose children she had carried in her body 5 times. This man who had held her hand in the car after the doctor's warning and said, I understand. And she understood finally and completely that she had been waiting 12 years for a protection that was never going to come. All right, she said. They came for her at 11:30 that night. Not violently. That was the thing she would think about afterward. That it was done without shouting, without broken things, which made it somehow worse. Mama Bayo came to the bedroom door with the uncle and told her, in a voice that was almost pleasant, that arrangements had been made for her and the children to go. A bag had already been packed. A car was outside. Bayo was not in the room. Dami dressed her daughters in the dark. Juliet moving silently, quickly, with the practiced calm of a child who had already quietly packed her own bag. Tolu held Success's hand without being told. Destiny slept through it in her wrapper on Dami's back. The 5th daughter, not yet named in this compound, not yet welcomed, lay against Dami's chest in the carrier. They walked through the compound at 11:30 with their bags. Mama Bayo stood at the parlor doorway and watched them go. Bayo was nowhere to be seen. At the gate, Juliet stopped walking. She turned and looked back at the compound, the lit parlor window. the generator hum, the house she had grown up inside. And she stood there for 3 full seconds, in the way that 12-year-olds stand when they are memorizing something or releasing it. Then she turned back, took Success's hand from Tolu, and walked through the gate behind her mother. Into the night, into whatever came next. If this story is touching your heart right now, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to this channel. There are women in the world carrying exactly what Dami is carrying. Silently, alone, with children on their backs and no one standing beside them. The least we can do is witness their story to the end. Stay with me. What happens next will change everything. The first months were the hardest. Not because Dami broke, she did not break, but because surviving with 5 daughters and no plan and nowhere to go requires a specific kind of endurance that has no name in any language, only a feeling. The feeling of putting one foot in front of the other in the dark, not because you can see where you are going, but because your children are watching your feet and learning from them how to walk. She went to Ibadan. Her father, Dotun, opened his door without a single word of "I told you so," which was the greatest kindness anyone had shown her in years. He simply moved things around in the house to make room, the way a man does when he has been quietly expecting a knock on his door and has already decided what his answer will be. She slept for 2 days, then she got up and began. She found work through a woman at her father's church, a small catering business that needed someone reliable and detail-oriented. Dami was both. She worked from early morning, came home in the evenings, cooked dinner, checked homework, nursed the baby, and did it again the next day. She did not speak often about what had happened. She did not perform her suffering for anyone's benefit. She simply moved forward, steadily and without theater, the way she had always done everything. Juliet threw herself into school with the focus of a child who has decided that education is the only room where no one can ask her to be smaller. Her teachers noticed within the first term the quality of attention she brought to everything and the way she answered questions with a precision beyond her age. Tolu, who had been flinching for months, gradually unclenched. The shoulders dropped. The laugh came back. Success started singing again, quietly at first, then with the full unself-conscious volume of a child who has remembered she is allowed to take up space. Destiny grew fat and healthy, and completely unaware that she had almost not survived. The 5th daughter, whom Dami named Imole, meaning light, learned to smile at 6 weeks and did not stop. The house in Ibadan was small and sometimes loud, and never enough and always enough. It was theirs. Back in Lagos, Bayo married Miracle within 4 months. The compound celebrated. Mama Bayo wore new lace to the introduction ceremony and told everyone within hearing distance that the family's season of waiting was finally over. Bayo stood in photographs looking like a man who was performing happiness for an audience and hoping the performance would eventually become real. Miracle was young and pleasant and understood clearly what she had been brought into this family to do. Within 3 months, she was pregnant. Mama Bayo held prayer sessions. The aunts bought more blue fabric. An uncle declared it at a family gathering. This time, God has heard us. The baby came on a Wednesday. A boy. The compound erupted. Mama Bayo wept. This time from joy, genuine and loud and complete. Bayo stood in the hospital corridor with his hands pressed together and his eyes closed and something on his face that looked like relief so deep it had become physical. He named the child himself. He called his friends. He planned the naming ceremony with more energy than he had brought to anything in years. The truth arrived quietly, the way truth usually does, through a crack nobody thought to watch. It was Miracle's phone. Left open on the kitchen counter on an ordinary Tuesday evening, a message visible on the screen from a contact saved only as a first name, a name Bayo did not recognize. The message was affectionate in a way that required no interpretation. Bayo picked up the phone. He read. He scrolled back. He sat down on the kitchen floor. He sat there for a long time. He did not confront Miracle that night. He went to his cousin, a man he trusted, and told him quietly what he had found. The cousin, who had a cautious mind, suggested the one thing that would settle the question permanently. A paternity test, private. No announcement until the results came back. The results came back in 3 weeks. The boy was not his. The information moved through the family the way a fire moves through a dry compound. Faster than anyone expected, and leaving less behind than anyone was prepared for. Mama Bayo received the news sitting in her parlor chair, and the women who were present said she did not speak for a very long time. She simply sat with her hands in her lap and stared at the middle distance like a woman reviewing in real time the full cost of every decision she had made over the past 13 years. Miracle left. There was no dramatic exit. She simply gathered her things over several days and was gone, taking the child with her. Bayo did not fight it. He had no fight left. The aunt stopped visiting as frequently. The uncle who had presided over Sunday lunches and said nothing while Dami sat with her hands flat on the table became suddenly difficult to reach by phone. The compound went quiet. Mama Bayo aged visibly in the months that followed. Not from illness, but from the particular exhaustion of a woman who has spent years building something and watched it come apart in her hands. She did not speak publicly about what had happened. She went to church more often. She was seen sometimes in the evening sitting alone in the compound where she had once held court, and the neighbors who passed gave her a respectful distance that was also quietly a kind of verdict. And Bayo lost the business partnership he had been building with his uncle's side of the family. The connection that had always required goodwill he had now exhausted. He moved into a smaller apartment. He sold the car. He stopped appearing at family gatherings because the gatherings had become uncomfortable in the way that places become uncomfortable when people know too much about you and have decided what they think. He was 41 years old, and he had nothing that mattered. He came to Ibadan on a Saturday. He called first. Dami almost did not pick up. She stood in the kitchen of her father's house holding the phone, watching his name on the screen, and breathed for 4 full seconds before she answered. He asked if he could come. She said she would ask her daughters. She gathered them in the sitting room that evening. Juliet, 16 now and studying for her exams. Tolu, 13 and already the loudest person in any room she entered. Success, 9 and still singing, always singing. Destiny, 4 and entirely unbothered by everything. Imole, 3, who had never known a different life than this one. She told them their father wanted to come and speak to them. She told them it was their choice. She told them there was no wrong answer. Juliet spoke first, the way she always did. Let him come, she said. We should hear him. The others agreed in the way younger children agree when the eldest has spoken with that particular, quiet authority. He sat in the sitting room on a Saturday afternoon, and he was smaller than Dami remembered him. Not physically. He was the same man, but there was something in the way he held himself. The way he looked around the room at his 5 daughters arranged across the furniture, that was genuinely reduced. He was not performing. That was the first thing Dami noticed. For the first time in 12 years, Bayo was not performing anything. He spoke for a long time. He said things that were true, and things that were late, and things that were both. He said he had failed them. He said he had chosen the wrong things in every moment that mattered. He said he was sorry. Not with the rushed, cover-seeking sorry of a man who wants to move past an uncomfortable topic, but with the slow, considered sorry of a man who has had many months alone to understand exactly what he is apologizing for. He looked at Juliet when he said it. He only looked at each of them. Nobody in the room said anything for a while after he finished. Then Juliet, 16 years old and already carrying herself like someone who has decided who she is going to be, leaned forward in her chair. We forgive you, Daddy, she said. Her voice was even, clear. We forgive you because we do not want to carry this. Not because what you did was small. She paused. But we are not coming back. And you cannot come here and be our father now as though nothing happened. We built something without you. That is ours. Tolu nodded. Success looked at her hands. Destiny watched her father with the wide, uncomplicated eyes of a 4-year-old who was still deciding what she understood. Dami said nothing. She did not need to. Her daughter had said it for her, and said it better than she could have. Bayo nodded slowly. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. He did not argue. He did not ask for more than they were offering. He left an hour later. At the gate, he stopped and looked back at the house. The small, full, living house with the sound of children's voices coming through the window. And he stood there for a moment, the way his daughter Juliet had once stood at a compound gate in Lagos at 11:30, memorizing something or releasing it. Then he walked away. 7 years later. Juliet graduated from university with a degree in law, first in her department. Dami sat in the front row of the ceremony in her best Ankara, Imole on her lap, Destiny beside her eating biscuits, Tolu and Success behind them arguing quietly about something that made them both laugh. The auditorium was large and bright and full of proud families. When Juliet walked across the stage, Dami pressed her hand over her mouth, not to stop crying. She had stopped pretending she would not cry an hour before. To hold in something that had no name, the particular fullness of a woman who was thrown out of a compound at 11:30 with 5 daughters and the clothes on her back and had turned that night into this morning, who had been told that daughters were not enough and had watched, year by year, the absolute and total disproof of that. The family name, as it turned out, had not died with daughters. It had simply waited, quietly, stubbornly, with the dignity of women who refused to disappear, for the daughters to carry it somewhere worth going. There is a thing they say in the kind of families that have seen enough of life to speak plainly about it, that a woman's worth is not in what she produces, but in what she survives. Dami did not survive because she was exceptional. She survived because she was consistent. Consistent in her love, consistent in her dignity, consistent in her refusal to let the cruelty of others become the story she told herself about who she was. The son they tried to replace her for was never his. The daughters they dismissed built everything, and the house that threw her out in the dark is quiet now, while the house she built from nothing is full of light. This story teaches us something that African mothers have always known, but have rarely been told out loud. A woman's value was never in the gender of her children. It was never in how well she endured mistreatment, or how quietly she absorbed the cruelty of people who should have loved her. Dami did not win because she was lucky. She won because she refused, through exhaustion, through grief, through the worst nights, to let what they said about her become what she believed about herself. And her daughters, the very ones they called a failure, became her greatest vindication. The womb they weaponized against her produced the lives that outlasted everything they built without her. Daughters are not a consolation prize. They are the inheritance. If this story moved you, please like this video right now. It takes 1 second and it tells us to keep creating stories like this one. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. A mother, a sister, or a friend who has been told she is not enough. Drop in the comments, what part of Dami's story stayed with you the most? We read every single comment. We will see you in the next story. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. That means everything to us. You are not just a viewer. You are the reason these stories get told. Until next time, take care of yourself, protect your peace, and remember, what they threw away, God kept. Good night.